You are watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois, Sunday evening, 6 p.m., September 4th, 2022. An unusual time for us to meet. Normally we meet at 11 p.m. or so. Today we're trying to play a little early. And we are continuing our playthrough of the play-by-mail game made by murdersbymail.com called Sherlock Holmes Fellowship of Bones. We're on turn 9. I've got the reply here in the mail. We will review where we are and open this up quickly. Let me just check in with the chat, make sure the audio and video is okay. We had a long session last night. We played for about 7.5 hours. We played Cold Case Investigation Unit Case 2, an Unforeseen Murder, which was pretty fantastic as a case. I'm looking forward to playing Case 3, maybe next weekend, and then doing a review after we finish all of the cases. As a reminder, 2 hours from now, we'll play the LA Noire play-by-mail game that we're playing simultaneously. So if you're interested in that one, I'll see you at 8 p.m. Central Time. And if you haven't watched the previous episodes of this, turns 1 through 7, you should stop watching now. Go watch those. You can catch up with us afterwards. These sessions are about an hour each, and you could probably skip the first 10 minutes of each of them. All right, I think I need a reminder of where we left off at the end of the last session. Let me check my notes and see where we sent people. So if we look here, the last place we sent our investigators, we sent Watson to the Chemical Society in the Burlington house. B7 is the Chemical Society president, right there. And there's a reason we did that. In fact, these first and the third clue points, the second place we went is to one of the informants, the Office of Legal Records. Both of these were related to our prime suspect. Our prime suspect is a guy named Davidson. I believe that's right, if we look at our last set of clues that we read. Yeah, Mr. Davidson. Now, Richard Davidson lives right near where the cab dropped off the person who had red all over their clothes. Maybe blood, although when we met the neighbor, she said he brings me his clothes to clean all the time. He's a chemist, and he had iodine all over his clothes. So it may not have been blood, it may have been iodine. And when we go back into the Burlington House, the Royal Society, we're told that Mr. Davidson is working, I forget in what capacity he's working. He's not working as a chemist, but that's his background as a chemist, and he's in need of money. That's why he took a job doing other stuff. Maybe as a custodian's helper or something. So we're going to the Chemical Society to see if someone there can tell us more about Davidson and if he might be working after hours in this place. He's helping out the librarian, Jonathan Warner reminds me. Okay, so we're trying to get a lead on him from his society contacts, and one of the reasons we are keen to do that is that there's a little bit of a discrepancy between when the librarian says he left at 4 p.m. in the basement and when the copper sees someone get into a cab out the back, which is at 5 p.m. There's an hour gap there. And the person who got into the cab went to this place right near Davidson's house, and it had blood on him, and it was physical description of him. So he's our really prime suspect. He had an hour to kill between the time he left. He's friends with the librarian who has a key to the back door, so he really looks good for this case. Going to the Office of Legal Records was because we think his connection to the victim is that he sued the victim for fraudulent investment in a South African diamond mine, that we know that our victim was doing this fraudulent stuff. Multiple people sued him. Our guy Davidson sued him, and if I'm remembering correctly, it was a little unclear, but it sounded like he won the lawsuit, but he won a very small penalty and felt like it was unfair. And we don't know how to find Richard Davidson's lawyer. And we also don't know how to find Richard Davidson. When we go to his house, which is near where the cab, she says he's often with his mother in the country. So we're hoping to find him with both of those leads. And then we sent Wiggins to the pawn shop in the far right corner of the map, far away from everything. And that's because we're pursuing the idea that the robberies at the Gentlemen's Club might be related to our case. And when we went to the Sheridan Gentlemen's Club, the guy said it's got to be an amateur thief because he actually pawned one of the things he stole at this pawn shop way out of the way. So that's where we're going. There's 2 pawn shops of interest. This is the Oriental one out of the way. There's another one where our victim probably pawned his boomerang. If I'm remembering correctly, we don't have a direct connection with Davidson and the Gentlemen's Club robberies. Is that correct, Jonathan? Like, we don't know that Davidson hangs out at the Sheridan Club, right? We have no direct connection with him and any of the locations of robberies or any of the robberies, other than we know he needs money. Does that match up with your memory, Jonathan? Or do we have some connection? Yeah. So they're kind of independent streams. All right, let's read our reply if there's nothing else. So we're experimenting with different times to play these games. I ran a poll. I said on the YouTube channel, there's a place where you can put polls. And I said, when is the best time for people? And everyone said, the weekend, late evening. Weekend evenings are best, which is what we're in now. And it's just me and Jonathan here. So I don't know about these YouTube polls. Okay, let's take a look at our replies here. Watson visited the Burlington House Chemical Society president. Wiggins visited the pawnbroker in the southeast of London. And Miss Hudson visited the Office of Legal Records. All right, we'll start at the front. Here's Watson at the president of the Chemical Society. To the eye, the rooms of the president of the Chemical Society is just another naturalist's office in a building full of them. But to the nose, it is a positive affront. The strong odor of rotten eggs assaulted me before I even entered the room. One wall of the room was given over to a counter full of glassware of various shapes and sizes filled with colored liquids. I assumed that the smell came from one of them. The president himself, one Alexander Crumb Brown, according to the plaque by the door, Alexander Crumb Brown, was a jovial man in his early 60s. His thick beard and thinning hair framed a pair of intelligent brown eyes. He spoke with a slight Scottish accent and was most accommodating throughout our interview. "How may I help you, sir?" he said as I entered. "I'm Dr. Watson, and I work with Sherlock Holmes. We're investigating the murder of Warren Edwards." "Oh, yes, I heard about it. Quite the hullabaloo it raised. How may I be of service?" Our inquiries have led us to a Mr. Richard Davidson, a fellow of the Royal Society and a chemist. I wondered what you could tell me about him. Of course. Please do have a seat. I sat as he pulled a large tome from the bookcase behind him. He leafed through several pages. Ah, yes. He has been a fellow of the Chemical Society for about 3 years. Inducted for his efforts in extending the work of Pasteur in the stereochemistry of salts and tartaric acid. Yes, I remember him now. A rather earnest young chap, quite eager to ingratiate himself with other fellows. Now that I come to think of it, I cannot recall seeing him at a meeting for some time now. Would you happen to know why he stopped coming? I heard a rumor that he encountered some financial hardships and was obliged to take employment. Such an eventuality would necessarily limit the time and resources required for effective chemical endeavors. Are all of your members men of means? Oh, not all, but the vast majority. The time and specialized equipment needed for our field of inquiry limit those who may take it up, if even only as a hobby. For good or ill, most naturalists are gentlemen. Is there anything else you can tell me about Mr. Davidson? I'm afraid not. If I recall correctly, I only had occasion to speak with him a half-dozen times over the last 3 years or so. As I said, a rather amiable character, but I cannot recall our conversations extending beyond chemical matters. Well, I said, I appreciate your speaking with me. Not at all. I hope you catch the culprit. I wouldn't worry. I've yet to hear of the case that Sherlock Holmes cannot solve. Okay, so that was useless. Right? He's a fellow for 3 years, but he hasn't been attending the meetings. Maybe that suggests that he's not been working on chemical stuff there. We were told what his specialty was, following in the footsteps of Louis Pasteur, in the stereochemistry of salts of tartaric acid. What are salts of tartaric acid? Remember, he claims he had iodine, not blood, on his pants. Are salts of tartaric acid related to iodine in any way? Jonathan says, it seems to indicate he's not been using the lab, but not really conclusive. That's true. What we were wondering was if he has iodine as he claimed, is he working in the lab after hours or with someone else? This guy seems to not have seen him or noticed him. It doesn't mean our guy isn't sneaking into the labs after hours, but it does make it less likely. If salts of tartaric acid, stereochemistry, I wonder what stereochemistry is. Obviously stereo is 2. I wonder if that has to do with making slides and if he would use iodine to stain stuff. It's certainly possible. Okay, but not very much information there. Let's see if Wiggins has better luck in the pawn shop. Lu Hong's pawn shop sits in the middle of London's Chinatown. The whole area feels like it's a different country. Poor, but has its own spark of life to it that I rather liked. Grocers sold live hens in cages and strong-smelling spices that I've never heard of before. The tea houses were filled with old men wearing brimless caps playing a game that looked like a cross between dominoes and poker. The shop itself was run down but still tidy. It sat between a fish market and an opium den called the Golden Dragon Social Club. That opium den could be of interest to us because we think our John Lawson, who hired us, is an opium addict. So we may want to visit that, although we don't think he's involved. He could be. He could know about some underworld dealings here. The interior of the pawn shop was filled with Chinese trinkets of all sorts, candles and incense and scrolls of paper covered with little blocky writing, and even a sword, maybe one of those swords that Chip Theory Game has been trying to bribe reviewers with. Someone in the chat says, Wikipedia definition, tartaric acid is a white crystalline organic acid that occurs naturally in many fruits, most notably in grapes, but also bananas, tamarinds, and citrus. Salt, potassium bitartrate, commonly known as cream of tartar, develops naturally in the process of fermentation. It's commonly mixed with sodium bicarbonate and it's sold as a baking powder, also as a leavening agent in food preparation. That's right, cream of tartar you can buy. I'm not sure why you would specifically use it, but I've got some. Okay, here we go. Thank you for that. Scrolls of paper covered with tiny little blocky writing, and even a sword. One corner of the shop was filled entirely with statues and jewelry made of jade. A thin coating of dust covered it all. Behind the counter was a small man with a long braid of hair under one of those brimless caps. His head was down as he studied a large ledger book. I cleared my throat. Without looking up, he said something that sounded like, "Ni hao," which is what he heard it properly, but he spelled it wrong. That means hello. "My knees are all right. Thanks for asking," I said. My knees are all right, because he misunderstood what the guy was saying. He looked up and I saw that he was Caucasian, about 30 years of age. "Oh, hello. Sorry about that. How can I help you?" "Are you Lu Ong?" I asked. "No, he's father-in-law. He's too sick to come in most days, so I run shop." I introduced myself and asked about the snuff box. That was the item that they found he was selling that was stolen. "Yes, I remember snuff box. The man was very insistent that it was his and that I give it to him for free. He threatened to call in police. In the end, I give him steep discount just to get him out of store." He's actually speaking a little better than I'm doing it. "Who sold it to you in the first place?" we ask. "I swear I didn't know it was stolen. Lots of people come in here, pawning treasures for money to throw away on opium. There's no way for me to know what's rightfully theirs." "Listen, mate, one artful dodger to another. I couldn't care less what's stolen and what's not. I've been asked to run down this one particular thief, and that's all that matters to me." He thumbed back through his ledger book and ran his finger down the columns. "Here we are. Pawned back in June. He said his name was Joseph Darwin." Name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. So if we had sent Watson here, he would have been like, "That's a fake name." But Wiggins is just like, it sounds familiar. Couldn't place it. I wrote it down in my notebook. "Can you remember what he looked like?" I asked. "Middle-aged, light brown hair, and a well-trimmed mustache. He's been in a few times since. He's always well-dressed, so I figure all the things were his. He always goes straight next door and does not emerge for several hours." Well, we know who the robber is now. "I don't reckon he spends hours haggling over fish, so I take it you mean the opium den." "Yes." "Well, that would explain him stealing things then." "I hope you catch him. I promise you that if he ever shows up here again, I'll call the police myself." "Of course you will," I said with a wink and a smile. "Now then, how much for the sword?" Okay, so we've cracked our side case right open, right down the middle with the sword. Right? He gives his name as Joseph Darwin. He's middle-aged with light hair and a well-trimmed mustache. We can go verify that in a second. But remember, our opium-addicted guy who hired us was Joseph Lawson. He gives his name here as Joseph Darwin. He has been in here pawning lots of stuff. And as soon as he pawns it, he takes the money right next door and goes and gets his opium. So I believe we've now caught our side case culprit, the thief of the Gentleman's Club. It's the very guy who hired us, which also explains why he's so nervous. Because he's actually a thief of his own. And he knew that Sherlock Holmes would tie up his little case and catch him in the process of catching the murderer. So let's mark his description. We'll check that in a second to make sure. Always goes straight next door. Been in a few times since. Always well dressed. Okay, that was a fun little interaction there. Let's go look up our description of Joseph Lawson in our intro. John Lawson. Okay, let's find the description of him. I opened the door to reveal a middle-aged man with light hair and a well-trimmed mustache. Middle-aged man with light hair and a well-trimmed mustache. This is Lawson. And what's the description given by the pawn shop owner? Middle-aged, light hair, well-trimmed mustache. So this is Joseph Lawson. Exclamation point. We found our robber, our Gentleman's Club robber. He should have used the disguise, but he's addicted to opium, so, you know, he's not thinking all that clearly. So, turn 8, Southeast 59, Wiggins, at pawn shop, Joseph Lawson is the Gentleman's Club thief. And opium addict. And the club he goes to for his opium is the Golden Dragon Den. Sorry, Golden Dragon Social Club. Let's look that up for the fun of it to make sure to see if we can go there. Let's see, clubs. There's a Diogenes Club where Mycroft is. Golden Dragon Social Club, Southeast 58. Southeast 58. So if we wanted to, we could go here just to catch him. But this was a big lead. Big clue that we caught our gentleman's thief. It also explains why he's nervous, and now we know that's almost certainly not related to our murderer. So at least we've sort of tied that up in a bow, which is nice. All right, let's see what Miss Hudson found. The Legal Records Hall in the law courts looks like nothing so much as a particularly drab library. Line after line of shelves fill the room, packed with books and boxes. The place positively reeked of dust, and swarms of the stuff floated in the sunbeams slanting in through the windows. Despite your description, I found myself quite astonished by Leonard Tolbert's height and thinness. A veritable beanpole of a man. I had to resist the urge to rush out and bake him a meat pie. He was quite well-mannered and ignored my shameful stare. Once I'd gathered myself and introduced myself and my relation to you, Sherlock, he was eager to help. I imagine that sorting through legal records all day is powerfully rewarding. But he seemed delighted to help the great detective, even if only at second hand. "How may I help you today, Mrs. Hudson?" he said. "I'm looking for anything you might have regarding one Warren Edwards." He was murdered at the Royal Society recently, and we're hoping to uncover something that could hint at a motive. Of course, I'll just pop back and see what I can dig up. So we're asking about Warren Edwards, our victim. He disappeared into a back room for nearly half an hour before he finally emerged with a small stack of crinkled and water-damaged papers. I only found one reference to Warren Edwards, but it looks as if someone spilled tea on it. The front page is all right, but the rest is a right mess. The case was decided just this past month. Let's see here. Edwards was the defendant in a fraud case. Plaintiff was one R. Davidson. That's our suspect. No address given. Barrister for the plaintiff, Charles Deacon. We were looking for that. We were looking to see if we could find his barrister so we could visit. That's great. Barrister for the defendant, Archibald Collins. Right, we knew that. We already knew that. We already spoke to Archibald Collins. Verdict for the plaintiff, award of £100. That could be a little or a lot, depending on the case. Did it say what the suit was about? Fraud can mean a lot of things. I'm afraid that's in the ruined bits. Though, now that I come to think of it, I seem to remember some rumors about a fraud case around this time. Apparently, there was quite a row at the announcement of the verdict. Plaintiff was not pleased at the amount awarded and kicked up quite a ruckus. Had to be restrained and removed from the court. Mr. Davidson was lucky he wasn't charged, by all accounts. That is, if it's the same case I'm thinking of. Sadly, it's not that uncommon for people to be unhappy with their verdict. Thank you very much, Mr. Tolbert. A pleasure, Mrs. Hudson. Give my regards to Mr. Holmes. Speaking of meat pies, you'd best finish that shepherd's pie tonight. I'm afraid the lamb will turn if left another day. Okay. So, in fact, he tells us about the lawsuit that we had heard about, but we didn't know the lawyer, and we did know it was Richard Davidson that sued him, and we knew Richard Davidson won but was unhappy. Now we've got Richard Davidson's lawyer, so we can go find more information about that lawsuit if we want, which we probably will because he's our best suspect, but I'm not sure we need any more information because we're told now he won £100. I can't remember if we were told it was £100 before, but we know he wasn't happy with it. So Richard Davidson's lawyer is Charles Deacon. And then Davidson won £100. He was very angry that it wasn't sufficient to cover all his lost investments. We don't know how much he invested, but when we talk to his lawyer, we might find out. Let's look up this lawyer, Charles Deacon, in his office and at home, so we have his address. So, barristers, Charles Deacon, Northwest 3. Okay, so there's Charles Deacon's address, and we might check him at home. I mean, there's no need to do this now. We could simply try him at work, most likely place he'd be, and then look him up at home if we can't find it. But we're trying to get into the habit of writing down addresses as soon as we have some that we could look up so that there's less chance we'll forget and overlook it. Okay, so I don't see a home address for Deacon. That's just fine. All right. Well, this was a pretty productive set of clues, except for the Chemical Society guy. Is there any chance we missed something of import here? We learned what he was working on, but tartaric acid doesn't really help us. Can't recall seeing him for a meeting for some time now. Financial hardships, we already knew that. He's working for the librarian. It's odd that he's taken, well, I guess we should say this. We know he's come on financial trouble, but I guess we did learn something important here. What did we learn? We ask about Richard Davidson. He says he's been a fellow for 3 years. He's been a fellow for 3 years. I think the important thing to note, perhaps, here is that he never worked here. So it's kind of odd that he took a job here, if not to specifically to get close to the victim and kill him. Although you could say, well, he was a member here, so he had contacts here. I'm just trying to think if maybe this isn't a clue, the fact that he never worked for this guy and had no relationship with this guy suggests he had no real reason to be in this place and working here, if not to get close to the victim to kill him. But on the other hand, you could say he was a member of this society, and so it would be natural that he would ask for work here. Amiable character. Okay. All right, so let's do what we've been doing. Let's mark that this is reply 8 for our records. And let's decide where we want to go to next. Otherworldly Ravenous Beast, ORB, says there were 2 side cases, right? The club one and the docks and crates. Well, these are side cases from the newspaper. The docks and crates was, I don't know if I really considered that an official side case, unless you're talking about the daring jewel robbery with Countess Howe. I guess that is another side case. This one we solved. The theft at the clubs we've solved. But I guess we think that's different from the Countess Howe case, which might be solvable. Is that the case you're referring to when you're talking about the docks? Let's call this the Countess Howe side case, if that's what we're talking about. Because when you say docks, it makes me think of the guy who we've been trailing, who works at the docks, the custodian's son. Okay, so Jonathan says we could try to follow the other side case and visit Countess Howe. I like the idea of visiting Countess Howe since we have her address. It makes sense to send someone there. It makes sense maybe we send Miss Hudson there. Where do you want to send the other 2? I think maybe it makes sense. We have our number 1 suspect. It seems logical that we should be pursuing at least 1 or 2 leads with him whenever we can. Our only lead left for him is his lawyer. So I think we got to send someone to the lawyer. That's either going to be Hudson or Watson. We're not very well going to send Wiggins, the ruffian, to the lawyer. So shall we send Watson to the lawyer? And we could send Hudson to the Countess Howe. And then for Wiggins, we could send him to the opium den if we want him to try to catch Lawson. I'm not sure we really need to catch Lawson in the act. We know what he's up to, but we could. We've also got a couple other places. We have the pawn shop where our victim pawned his boomerang. We could go there and see what that's about. That seems like it might be a red herring now. we could go to another informant. Let's remember, we keep forgetting that we've got informants. We could go to the police news. We could maybe learn about the Howe case that way. We've got 2 other newspaper places. We could go to the museum library. We don't really have a good reason to visit Mycroft yet. We could also visit, what was I thinking? Yeah, Burlington House places. There are other places in Burlington House we haven't been. So, we haven't been to the Society of Antiquities. Remember, we're told about some Egyptian vase that broke or something. We also haven't been to the room that our victim was in right before he went downstairs and got killed. And we haven't been in the lecture hall where all the people were hanging out before he got killed. One of those places, now that we know we're searching for Richard Davidson, one of those places might recognize him. So these are all good places to visit. And we could also go to the Burlington House itself. For some reason, that's a separate place that we could go to. Okay, so I think we're in agreement that Watson has to go to, we're going to follow up the barrister and let's send Watson there. Although Hudson could go there if we didn't want her to go somewhere else. So someone's going to the barrister, probably, well, we don't, it could be Hudson too. Where did we think we wanted to send Hudson? To Howe, the Countess Howe. All right, let's send Watson to the barrister. Okay, so Watson is going to Northwest 3. Charles Deacon. Barrister for Richard Davidson. Do we want to send Hudson on this side case, or do we want to wait until we really run out of leads on our main case before we send Hudson to Countess Howe? I am interested in the other pawn shop. I am interested in other rooms of this place. If we are going to go to other rooms of this place, we've been sending Watson here. We could send Watson to these places and let Hudson go to the lawyer. She's good at getting the old men to talk. So it's not a crazy idea to send Hudson to the barrister and let Watson to go to one of these other places. Either way works for me though. We've got the other pawn shop. What else do we have? We have another big clue. We have another big clue that we almost forgot. And our previous place we went, let's not forget this. I need to mark this so we don't forget this. One of the places we went to, we went looking for the brother of our victim, which I think is you know, you're a cop, you're investigating murder, you want to find out about the victim, especially if he's involved in fraud. So we knocked on the door of another Edwards we found in the phone book. And this guy gets mad at us that everyone's knocking on his door looking for his brother, the brother of the victim, and he's not him. He just shares his last name. So we say his newspaper said he had a brother. It only seems natural that, you know, this is the house. And he cuts us off. He says, I don't know where that reporter got his information, and I don't care. If you're so intent on finding this dead man's brother, may I suggest you go down to the paper and talk to him directly. So the paper that wrote about him having a brother is the Police News. So it would make a lot of sense if we're going to follow this lead of the victim that we should try to find the brother. And that would be at the Police News, which is an informant, which is always going to have good information. So I'm inclined to send someone to the Police Gazette. Is it the Police Gazette? Yeah, Police News, Police News. So let's send Hudson. Well, we could send Hudson to the Barrister. Watson could go to the Burlington House, and Wiggins could go to the Police News. What do you think about that? Or you want to send Wiggins to a pawn shop and Watson to the Police News? Jonathan, why don't you make a call about which of those you want to follow? I know you're keen to follow through on our side case, and I'm okay with that. So we're sending Hudson to the Barrister. Watson and Wiggins. All right, I think we should send someone to find our victim's brother. That seems like a lead worth pursuing to me. So that means Police News. That's one of our informants. Police News. Let's read what it says when we decide who to send there. Let's see. Yeah, Police News is not an... Oh, yeah, Illustrated Police News. Hubert Fisher is a journalist who covers the local crime beat. He often knows things that have not been made public. Southwest 79. So let's send Wiggins to the Police News. Okay, Southwest 79 is the Police News. Hopefully we can learn about the brother. Okay, so last up is Watson. Police News is going to be Wiggins. That's green. So I'm going to put my marker for Wiggins going to the Police News. Whoops, that's the wrong place. There. Okay, so Wiggins is going to the Police News, and maybe related to the Newsboys. What's the Newsboys? Oh, because Wiggins is related to the Newsboys. Okay, let's send Watson to the lecture hall, says Jonathan. I mean, I like this logic. We're basically saying, look, before we start running around chasing down side cases of countesses losing jewelry, which some rich countess loses some jewelry, what do we care about that? That's the least of our concerns. We're following our prime suspect to his lawyer, and then our victim, we're trying to trace down what was going on with him, and then scene of crime. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Scene of crime, victim, prime suspect. That seems like the way you handle a case. So Watson is going to the lecture theater B5. And maybe someone will spot our Richard Davidson acting funny. So lecture theater at Burlington House. Okay, I like it. I like it. Shall we enter our things here? Okay. Remind me, I gotta remember to do a split screen with the laptop and the top down. I think I actually probably have one somewhere here. No, but it seems I'll have to make one because it seems like it's quite common that we want to look at the laptop and something I've got on the table, and I don't have one for that. Okay, so Watson to B5, the lecture theater. Wiggins to Southwest 79, the Police News. Hopefully you can find out why this guy wrote about the brother. Hudson goes to Northwest 3, which is Charles Deacon, the barrister for Richard Davidson. And before we do that, the reason we're going to the police news, just to make sure we're on the same page, is that this newspaper is the police news, and it's the newspaper that who wrote about he's survived by a mother and a brother. So that makes sense. All right. So we're gonna submit this now. Send move. Well, there we have it. Turn 9 is in the books, and it's kind of exciting that we caught John Lawson. We really tied a bow on his whole escapade. Why he's nervous, because he's an opium addict. He's stealing stuff to get money to pay for his opium addiction. He's not nervous. He's not just nervous because he's an opium addict. He's nervous because he knows in hiring Sherlock Holmes to solve this murder, we're going to stumble onto his mishigas, and we have. All right. I guess we'll end it here, but I'll see you in about an hour for the LA Noire case. Kind of fun. I'm looking forward to it. We're not going to forget about our other side cases, but I think we've got our... Surely we've got our culprit in our sights now, Richard Davidson. It's just a matter of tracking him down, locating him. We may have to find his house. We may want to bust into that opium den and catch John Lawson, otherwise known as Darwin, aka Darwin. All right, so I'll see you in an hour or so, and thanks for joining me.